Welcome to our guest speaker series, 2023 Spring Guest Speaker Series by Nebraska Department of Education, What Language? In CLTA US SIG K-12 and Omaha Public Schools. Today we have invited Lea Kennedy to our webinar. She's presenting for the World Language Week. Thank you so much for doing this, Lea. And the topic is transforming our world through multilingualism and intercultural citizenship. And I guess we all know her. And so she is, Lea is I have to say, a very active, important person in Actful and NADSFL. Did I say it right? Is it NADSFL, right?
NADSFL, yep.
NADSFL, I'm sorry.
Yes, yes,
yeah.
You're right.
Yeah, so. And she is also a consultant of Actful.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the invitation, Crystal, and I'm thrilled to be here with you and the Nebraska folks today. I think it's amazing that you're organizing this full week of celebrating the power of languages. So I just want to thank you for that, because we need this in all 50 states. And through your leadership, you have provided some wonderful webinars this week that you're recording, and you're going to be able to share with districts and teachers and stakeholders around all the different parts of Nebraska. So I would encourage everybody to look at the videos from Arthur Cho from yesterday and come back on Saturday morning at 10 o'clock to join Dr. Ali Moeller and be able to learn more throughout this week. So today's topic is, as you said, transforming our world through multilingualism and intercultural citizenship. So I will be touching upon 3 different ways that I think we could be advocating for languages. So without any further ado, I'll start off just considering a little bit about how we need to be considering the role of languages in our world and how they continue to evolve. So if you look at this map here, which was actually just published in Babbel last week, these are the most spoken languages in the world. And these numbers reflect the current numbers for Chinese, Spanish, English, Arabic, Hindi, Bengali. So you can see that the numbers might be different than what you might have imagined. As you take a look at the most spoken languages in the United States, those languages change, and you can see that English, Spanish, Chinese are our top 3, followed by Tagalog. This is from the last US Census Bureau. And so the numbers are actually higher than this because we're looking at a map here that shows us the most common languages by state in 2017. So you can see how the languages between the world and the US shift. So then I started to think about, well, how about in Nebraska? As I travel from Connecticut on the East Coast where I live all the way out to Nebraska, I didn't realize how much diversity you would have with the languages spoken. And you can see here that it is quite a list. And a good percentage coming in with Farsi and Gujarati and also Tagalog. But you also see some Native American languages. So I thought to myself, Nebraska is really the good life. We have a good amount of diversity here with some exciting things happening across the state. So I started thinking about, how do we build this intercultural competence, and how do we start getting kids to think about solving real world problems with their language skills? So I love this quote by Sandra Sevignon. Learning to speak another's language means taking one's place in the human community. It means reaching out to others across cultural and linguistic boundaries. Language is far more than a system to be explained. It is our most important link to the world around us. Language is culture in motion. It is people interacting with people. And I think as we look at the transition in our language programs from traditional or grammar-based or vocabulary-driven. For anybody who's in their 50s like me or older, we know that we did a lot to talk about languages as opposed to interacting with languages. And if we're really going to get our students to interact with more people and connect around the globe, I think we need to think about having a shift where we really are going to help these students cross those cultural and linguistic boundaries. So as I take a look at the ways that we could advocate, the first way for me is really looking at the K-12 world language experience. You have the updated Nebraska World Language Standards, which are beautifully written and really articulate how a program will be built upon. You can see the first C of communication. You can see communities, connection, culture, and also cognition. And you can see that through these standards, we are able to develop global mindedness in our students. So as I think about who is in front of us in our K-12 programs right now, those are our Gen Z students. And they feel very strongly that they are agents of change. They are globally minded youth. They're motivated to solve problems. And they really want to use their communication skills to connect with others and interact with cultural competence. So when I started thinking about that Sandra Savignon quote, I found myself thinking, this is what the kids want. They are looking for ways to not talk about learning a language or talk about grammar or traditional approaches. They would like to actually use the language in order to communicate and solve real world problems. So if you look at the all the studies about Gen Z, they always have quotes that talk about who do they say has a role in creating change? And it always comes back to, it's me. Gen Z wants to make a difference. So what implications does that have for our programs? Well, I think it's an opportunity for us to look at units and say, okay, what could we do differently with a unit where students feel like they're making an impact in some way? That's not something that we always think about when we're building these units, but we might just take an existing unit and just refocus it, revise it a bit in order to give kids an opportunity to take action in some way. So this is a unit about education. It is grounded in the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And kids are looking at infographics about the International Day of Education. And as you can see on the right of the screen here, they're looking at ideas like 1 child in 5 does not have access to school. What does it cost to educate a student per day? Oh, it's $1.25 per day. Well, now they're starting to see an injustice here. Not that our kids always wake up ready to run into school every morning, but the fact that some students don't have access makes them realize that this is something that should be a right for all. You can see how certain kids in some countries or parts of the world are more impacted than others. And we started questioning, what is the purpose of education? Well, that's not something that they're often asked. And in the case of what the UN says, it's for the 4 Ps: population, planet, prosperity, and peace. So it's up in that infographic as well. Well, those kinds of provocative questions actually get them to think more about the role of education, as opposed to a unit where we're just studying the classes and the school supplies and how some schedules are similar to others. This is actually getting them to think about, what can I do? So at the end of this unit, the students raised money and they bought one of the UN school box kits that you send off for disaster relief. So after there's an earthquake or something that happens, they send these school kits in it, like a little metal suitcase, and has everything to have a portable classroom. Because all of a sudden the kids realize it is a privilege to have access to education. So how can we look at our units and allow them to use language to be agents of change? As we look at each of the units, we're thinking about how can we expand out, not just thinking about the communication goals of interpretive listening or reading, interpersonal communication, and presentational writing or presentational speaking. But how do we get them to access the perspectives of other cultures? When they start to consider the practices of other cultures, the products of other cultures, they start to realize sometimes we need to suspend judgment and consider those other practices and products, because we'll better understand the perspectives of other cultures. Now, as we talked about, you have a very long list of other languages spoken in homes all around Nebraska. Those families bring with them their own perspectives. And so getting the kids to consider those other perspectives is really important. In the case of a unit about family, you have diverse families and you have increasing diversity across the state of Nebraska. So if we take our traditional unit about family and start saying, well, how could we switch that a little bit to think about why are friends and family, because family members could often be friends that we bring in, it's part of our circle of care. Why are friends and family important to have a sustainable life and well-being? So now we're taking our traditional family unit and we're saying, actually, you have an opportunity to learn about perspectives of the role of families around the world and see how they strengthen us, they protect us, they respect us, they listen to us. So thinking about these topics in a new way to allow us to expand out to all of the goal areas and not just be focused on the linguistic aspect of the modes of communication. So I'm going to, at this point, consider a couple of questions. So I'd like people to feel free. I'm going to do this at 3 different points because I'm going to think about K-12, then I'm going to think about civic ready, and then finally the syllabi literacy. So feel free to add to the chat or unmute yourself to consider these questions. But as I'm thinking about the role of K-12 programs and access to quality world language programs across all parts of the state, rural, urban, isolated areas, as well as densely populated, how do we provide opportunities for our young learners to become curious about other perspectives and develop empathy for others? So I'm going to let people feel free to turn on your mics, turn on your video, or add to the chat. And Crystal, if I don't see something in the chat, feel free to share that. And then the other question that I have is, how can students be immersed in world language programs that foster intercultural competence, which, according to your Nebraska standards, often results in empathy, closer introspection, greater self-awareness, and active listening? I think if we consider these questions, these are ways that we could strengthen programs that we already have and really be able to reach out to our communities to show what our K-12 programs offer our learners that they cannot get in the other content areas. So I'm seeing that one way that we could be doing this is through community outreach. And yes, I think that especially as we see that we have a growing number of families, 12% as of the last census, which is going back a few years now, 12% of families in Nebraska speak Spanish. So that's a pretty high number. So what are we doing to do community outreach? I see that another idea is the intercultural field trips and service learning experiences. That is a great way to get the kids thinking about exchanging information with others, exchanging ideas that get at those cultural perspectives, but also if they're doing service learning, they're collaborating together. So that's actually also helping them to become civic ready. So in that case, we're really hitting both things, building the intercultural competence as well as the intercultural citizenship. Connections to other school subjects within the school community. That, I think, is a great way to show how our content is supporting and strengthening literacy skills through math, through ELA. It's also a way to show how we're deepening understanding in the sciences or giving more depth and understanding to the arts. So, so making connections with other content areas is another huge one. Making our learners cultural anthropologists in the role of active purveyor of knowledge through hands-on experience. I think this is fabulous. Getting them to, because in this case, we're also saying it is not us, the teachers, who are the purveyors of all knowledge. We are asking them to go out and become anthropologists so that they are gaining and building new knowledge with their peers. So I think oftentimes that is a great entry point to enrich our units, that we don't have to be worried as teachers that we have all the answers. Providing access to voices of members of the target cultures through the use of real-time interaction and authentic resources. As you see that growing list of languages and cultural connections across your state, I think that is a great way to start tapping into interactions. It could be from Crystal's idea of the service learning, on through guest speakers, on through simply asking them to record videos to give us, we often can't find some of those resources that we need at the novice and intermediate level. Give them an opportunity to find what is nature, what is biodiversity to you? And so now we're getting it from speakers of that language that reflect a variety of cultural perspectives. And then also developing awareness and curiosity. I think we have a great opportunity through our content to be able to pose provocative, essential questions that get kids curious about the world beyond their small, myopic world. Oftentimes teenagers are very, very self-absorbed, and we're trying to give them an opportunity to have a window out to look out, a mirror to see themselves, and then a sliding glass door so they can step out and become immersed in and curious about some other perspective. So thank you for adding those ideas to the chat. I'm going to have some more questions in this next segment. So we'll go ahead, and some of those answers already segued into this next part of advocating for languages so students are civic ready. I think when students develop communicative competence in another language, intercultural competence, allowing them to consider other perspectives and can take action to solve real world problems, that is when they develop intercultural citizenship skills. There are two people in our field who have done a lot of work on this, Dr. Michael Byram out of the UK and Dr. Manuela Wagner out of UConn, who have a book that was recently published by ACFL talking about opportunities to build intercultural citizenship into our units. And when we partner the language competence with that ability to solve real problems, we're starting to get these kids ready for developing their intercultural citizenship skills. And I know that Dr. Michael Byram is always talking about how we expect these kids to become good, active citizens at 18. Well, if that is our hope and our dream, then what are we doing with them in our classes when they are 5, when they are 8, when they are 12, in order to start building some of those citizenship skills up? So to be active in one's local and global communities, students need to consider those multiple perspectives, including opposing viewpoints, collaborate, and take collective action. So as we think about our units, how are we getting them to really meaningfully consider other perspectives? How are we getting them to connect with other students, even if it is just voice recordings or Flipgrid recordings, where students in Buenos Aires talk about the importance of biodiversity for them? That was one of the things that I did last year. I couldn't get the kids to connect live and in person because of our timing differences and scheduling differences, but they were able to collaborate through a series of recordings. And the kids couldn't believe that their perspectives on the importance of biodiversity from an urban perspective in Buenos Aires, in Argentina, were quite different in some ways than my suburban students from the state of Connecticut. So we started to talk about what could we do once we identified what we would take as action steps, and start to identify what can we do together. And so they talked about, at the end of this unit, my students would save up and buy the tree that you see down there in the picture, and their students would save up, and they were planting like a local community garden. And so we took the time to connect and say, how could we do something collaborative that will make an impact on climate change? So we were considering United Nations Sustainable Development Goal number 13, climate change. And it was interesting to see where the kids went with this. Not everybody wanted to do the same project, though. So if we're going to get these kids ready for global citizenship and intercultural citizenship, we also said there should be choice. And some kids said, well, we could actually do cleanups. Now, their kids were doing cleanups in a part of the city in Buenos Aires. Our kids were at a local park, and you could see them collecting the bags of trash. But the kids were making their own choices about this. I was not there. This was not something that I monitored. They were asked to say, in the target language, discuss what action steps you should take, collaborate with others to make a plan, and you, as a citizen of our community, can go do something to have an impact locally. Other students were motivated to get kids to stop buying so much fast fashion. The plastics, the environmental waste. And so they set up this little website called La Ropa Sostenible, sustainable clothing. And they encourage people to bring in clothing, drop it off in the front office. They donated it to Goodwill, Salvation Army, local places in our community to encourage thrifting. So that was their way of taking action. So the students in Buenos Aires and the students in Connecticut exchanged emails and conversations. Sometimes it was just me collecting all of their ideas, and then I sent it on to the teacher, and then they did back and forth conversations about that. And they decided that the way that they wanted to make a difference was to do this website that you can see here. But I think student voice and choice, as you're thinking about becoming civic ready, it is really important, because if they're motivated to do environmental work, listen, it's Gen Z. They're agents of change, and by golly, you should go out on Saturday and clean up your local park. But it's something that is attainable and something that they can do, so that we're not asking them to become voters who are responsible at 18 without ever having thought about why we need to do these things to protect our community. So, so now I'd like to ask a few more questions about what we could do to provide more opportunities to become civic ready and develop this intercultural citizenship. So as you're thinking about programs in your state or in your area, are there ways that world language programs could foster more collective problem solving around global issues that impact local communities? So I think the collective could happen in different ways. As I shared, the collective could happen with a sister school. The collective could happen at a variety of levels. So as you're thinking about what ideas you'd like to share, feel free to go in any direction. And then how can students develop intercultural citizenship through collaboration with students beyond the classroom walls and beyond our borders, by using their language skills to access diverse perspectives on global topics? For anybody who was lucky enough to hear Chef Jose Andres at the ACTFL convention this year, he kept talking about using language to extend the table as a chef, to get more people seated at the table, to get more people involved in the conversation. And I think we often shortchange ourselves and our students by not extending that table, by not going beyond the classroom walls or beyond our borders to be able to say, what can we do to make an impact about some topic, some challenge? And that's where we're going to get at those diverse perspectives, because the way that kids in Germany or the way that kids in China or in France are looking at helping a problem, whether it's an earthquake in Turkey or a global climate issue, everybody brings a different perspective. And so if we could help kids to suspend judgment until they consider other perspectives, we could go a long way in getting these kids to have a better contribution to the solutions, because most of the problems we're facing now are not local. They are very much global, whether it's a chemical spill in Ohio that permeates that whole area, or an iceberg the size of Florida that's about to fall off. Those are problems that we can't solve with just the folks in Nebraska saying, we're going to go at it really hard. We need a real global approach to it. So I'm going to go ahead and just open up this chat here. Okay, so I see Joanne sharing, promoting wondering rather than learning of facts. Oh, that's great, Joanne. I love to use that Harvard Project Zero. I see, I think, I wonder. We really can start getting at prompting kids to think and look at ideas in new ways. Investigate the contribution of immigrants to skilled labor in the community or the state, especially as a project for heritage learners. Oh, that's a great idea. And I'm happy that you're bringing the heritage learners here, because that's where I'm going to go with this next portion here. That could be a wonderful way to go beyond our classroom walls and be able to tap into that talented pool that we have coming to our country. Crystal shared collaborative projects with CTE programs to provide intern experience, serve the world language community. Yep, that's great. A wide variety of programs here. Okay, and then oh, I see, Joanne, yours was from the previous question, yet it still works very well with this, because if we are going to get these kids to wonder about how they can have an impact, it would actually work here as well. So
well, one of the things, Lea, that with my comment about the immigrant experience and their contribution is these kids actually did this at Omaha South, that has 85% heritage learners. And basically, they actually created a brochure with the contributions of immigrants to the economy, to the labor force, to the arts, all of that. It was just an amazing project.
wow, that is fabulous. Is that publicly posted anywhere? That
no, but I can put you in touch with the woman who does that with her. It's one of my former students, Laura Chambers.
Wonderful. That would be a great thing. I'm just thinking we have people from Connecticut, New York, Nebraska on here. I'm just thinking implications for other states as well. Because
and it made them feel good about themselves too, what they're contributing, it's which was the plus, but also this is something for the public now. Look, let's check it out here. What are they doing? They're not just here for not contributing any. Look what they're doing for the economy. And they did, they involved the math and statistics and all of this. It was really cool.
Oh, that's wonderful. And that's just such a great way to celebrate the rich fabric of our communities and quite honestly, celebrate that diversity, because we know that we go through waves where the diversity is not celebrated as much. And I think that whatever we can do to lift that up, I think is important. Okay, so I'm gonna, and feel free to jump in like Allie did, to be able to share any of those ideas. Don't feel like you have to type them in the chat as well. Well, the last way that I'm thinking that we can really advocate for our programs is to tell our communities and show our communities how these programs really get the students ready for college and work readiness. So this is an example. The photo down below is a teacher who brought her students into, I I believe it's Nebraska State, and she was bringing high school students in to get them to learn about all of the different programs that are available once you get to the college, and get them tested for the seal of biliteracy. So really luring kids in to say, this is yet another skill, another asset that you're bringing. The state of Nebraska is one of the states that does indeed have 2 levels for the seal. It has the gold and the silver. Gold gets all the way up to advanced low or intermediate high, and the silver is intermediate mid. And so we can be able to add that to transcripts, add that to resumes, to be able to say, after my journey through the K-12 program, or at whatever point I was studying, what it could be another pathway, as we'll talk about in a moment, I come to you as an employee with these additional talents and skills, and really celebrating what they bring to the table. So, so you have all kinds of brochures about the Nebraska Seal of Biliteracy, talking about the purpose, talking about why it is so important. And I feel like if there's one drum to beat, and I have been doing this a lot for my own state where I've been working with the Seal of Biliteracy, it's teach for proficiency, assess for proficiency, and award for proficiency, so that we can say our programs are very important because they're leaving here with a certified skill that will really take them on to their next adventure. So if you look at the benefits, we have 49 states with the Seal of Biliteracy. South Dakota is working on it. So I just want that box to go into the nice blue soon. But across our whole country, we have states that are recognizing this. Now, close to you in Nebraska, you have a couple states that by law or by policy are giving credits. So I want to just talk about the financial implications. I happen to have 2 children in college right now. So I would be thrilled if their colleges were by law or by policy giving credits for getting the Seal of Biliteracy. Regardless of what state you come from with the Seal of Biliteracy, if you go to Illinois, Minnesota, Hawaii, or Maine, you will get credits by law for that, attaining that level of proficiency. In the case of by policy, it is Missouri and Mississippi. And as you look at universities and post-secondary institutions across the entire country, you will see that there is a smattering throughout each state where they are giving credit. So Connecticut, for example, is not on that list, but the state, one of the state universities, Central Connecticut State University, awards 9 credits for the Seal of Biliteracy. So that is twofold. It's a financial benefit for these students, but it is also allowing the students to say, wow, I have 9 credits towards a minor in that, so I only need to take a couple more classes and I could go on and get a minor because I'm coming in with a high level of proficiency to start with. So I know that there are universities, one that I'm working with right now in New York that is considering giving 9 credits because they're seeing it from the university end as a way to draw in students. So it could be one more feather in your cap to say, I got the Seal of Biliteracy in Nevada, in California, whatever state, and now I'm going to go to a private university in New York and they will give me those credits. So that it could be both time-wise and a financial benefit to those students. So I'd like to just think about what are some of the ways that we could be able to transform our world through multilingualism and intercultural competence. And I think that another way that we can do that is by thinking about pathways for those languages that are not taught in our schools. So as you can see here, and this, again, this map is from the last Census Bureau, so this is going back a few years. It was at 12%, and I'm sure it is higher now, that speak Spanish or another language, I'm sorry. But it actually, that's interesting because I think the current number is close to that for Spanish, now that I'm thinking about that. But how can we lift up those students who are coming from all those languages I shared on one of the previous earlier slides, and how can we celebrate those traditions by providing pathways to the seal of biliteracy for heritage speakers? So Ali just shared one idea of celebrating how heritage speakers and immigrants are enriching your local communities. And I'd love to be able to chat now or discuss what are some of the other ways that you are encouraging students to pursue literacy skills, so that's not just the spoken language, but the reading and writing, so that they can get the recognition of perhaps their school taught language as well as their home or heritage language. So, so can we share some thoughts in the chat here about what you feel we could do around the state? And it could be in other states as well. You can see the numbers here continue to grow across all of these states as you're looking across. So whether you're from Nebraska or from another state, what are some of the ways that we could get more students to be recognized for their language skills through different pathways? And I can't see. Okay. So Crystal, I know that Nebraska State is one of the places that was bringing in high school students. Do you know of other places where students are being brought in to take the stamp or the Apple test in order to demonstrate their abilities in another language? Are you aware of any of that happening in other parts of Nebraska?
I don't know whether it's happening in Nebraska, but we are starting a conversation about competency-based credit for, especially for those EL students who have been spent so much time in EL class, so they miss a chance to take what language. But they are fluent, bilingual, because they have their home language. So we want to have this competency-based credit established so that they can get pass a proficiency test like an Apple test or a STEM test, still get the credit for what language in their home language. Right. To be able to go to college or for their career purpose in the future. In this way, they are not further marginalized in their future, career or academic life.
Right. That's wonderful. I know that more districts are considering pathways in earlier levels, for example, Spanish for Spanish speakers at the middle level. That's a very common thing at high school, but I'm seeing more considering it at younger levels to start building up some of those literacy skills in middle school so that the student could be able to test at and be able to get the seal of biliteracy earlier and be able to possibly, continue with another language as well. So I think that looking at other alternatives, oftentimes Spanish speakers are thrown into the language classes. The program starts in 7th grade and we put our non-speakers of Spanish, and then we put in all of those heritage and native speakers, some of whom are recent arrivals, and they're put into the Spanish class, not getting much of a benefit from that. In fact, often it can be quite boring to learn your colors or weather expressions when you've been speaking that language for the last 12 years. So, so looking for different ways that we can support our heritage learners through dual immersion, through other pathways, even weekend programs. I know that that's been another big avenue for people being able to test and get the seal of biliteracy from the home language, and then supporting it with more of the literacy through those weekend pathways, weekend learning programs as well.
Yeah, we are trying, we have distinguished World Language Scholar Award for high school students during World Language Week. This year is the first year that I open it for private schools and also non-public schools. That means the community language schools, which are teaching, Chinese or Korean, and other like a Hebrew language, those students can apply as well. So this is the first time we did it, and we actually have at least, around 20 students from non-public schools applying for those languages that are not taught in public schools. We are trying to include all the languages.
What a great way to show equity and to be inclusive of all the languages, and then that they come where to do the testing? Do they come to a university, or how is that organized?
We ask teachers to recommend the best student on their on each level. So we have invite teachers who have not nominated their students to review their portfolio. So
Wonderful.
we have oral submission and also written submission. So it's combined the two parts, and also teacher input and student reflection on their world language learning experience and their intercultural competency, competence, and also how they see language learning, how important language learning is for themselves. So it's a combination portfolio that include the demonstration of different abilities, including language ability. So we take like top 70 students to award them distinguished world language award.
That's incredible. That's wonderful. These are great ideas to share amongst the states. So starting with your World Language Week, which I just think is an amazing idea to be able to focus on different languages each day and different activities for the students. So that's great. I want to just come back to the chat here, because Allie has added some things about how in Nebraska we have numerous schools that offer I think that those are SS classes.
Spanish for Spanish speakers.
Oh, Spanish for Spanish speakers. Okay, wonderful. And is that happening at the high school level, at the middle school? Where is it happening?
Middle and high school, mainly
Terrific.
high school. Yeah.
Mainly high school is what I'm seeing. And so even dropping that down a little bit earlier, I think to start building up the literacy skills is great. And then you also have dual language in rural and urban communities, which is just the best way to be able to build these skills. And as well as
Not enough, by the way.
yeah, right. We need more. And then I like Rita's idea of making sure that we have innovative scheduling in order to allow students to take multiple world languages. That is something that we often stymie the kids with, because we say, even though you're making great gains in one language, you have to go back to level 1 in that second world language. And oftentimes they can skip that and be able to go right into 2 and be able to do multiple languages simultaneously. So these are some great ideas here. In the chat, Crystal, you might want to go ahead and share that as well, because there are some wonderful ideas that people can come back and access afterwards. But what I'd like to do is just thank everybody for their contributions and for everything you're doing to support language learners. We have some incredible cheerleaders and champions of language acquisition and language learning on this call today. And we really would not be where we're at without having you do the work that you've done over these past decades to build up language leaders, to build up language programs, and to provide a variety of ways that students can work towards getting the seal of biliteracy and to attain proficiency in 1, 2, or 3 additional languages. So I'm honored to be here today. And Crystal, I want to thank you for all of your efforts to keep expanding programs across the state of Nebraska.
Thank you, Lea, for doing this. I really appreciate it. It's a lot for me to learn, a lot of ideas. Thank you.
Thanks, Lea. That was great.
Oh, thank you. Okay,
Thank
so did
you,
start
everyone.
recording? Okay, it was so nice that we had a group of people on today and nobody from the schools because it's a snow day in Nebraska.
Yeah, I know. And you know what? They're probably